Hi, this is Mac from Mac's List. Before we start the show, I want to let you know about my new book, Land Your Dream Job Anywhere. I've been helping job seekers find meaningful, well-paying work since 2001, and now I put all my best advice into one easy-to-use guide. My book shows you how to make your resume stand out in a stack of applications, where you can find the hidden jobs that never get posted, and what you need to do to ace your next job interview. Get the first chapter now for free. Visit maxlist.org/anywhere. This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm Mac Pritchard, your host and publisher of Mac's List. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ben Forstag, Becky Thomas, and Jessica Black from the Mac's List team. This week, we're talking about how to tell your life story in a job interview. Sometimes the hardest story to tell is the one we tell about ourselves. Modesty, lack of objectivity, and insecurity all come into play. But the ability to tell our own story is critical to successfully navigating job interviews, networking events, and first-time meetings with others. This week's guest expert is Rob Biesenbach. He says you need to know how to tell your life story in a job interview. Rob and I talk about how to do this later in the show. A LinkedIn page offers another chance to tell your life story. Many of us, however, don't make the most of that opportunity. Ben has found a list of the top 5 things, in fact, that the worst LinkedIn pages share in common. He tells us more in a moment. You're a new college graduate, full of energy and ambition. You've gotten several job interviews, but no offers yet. Is it because employers think you're too optimistic and inexperienced? And what can you do about this? That's our listener question of the week. It comes from Heather Rockwell in Newberg, Oregon. Becky shares her advice shortly. First, as always, let's check in with the Mac's List team. I'm here with Becky and Jessica and Ben. And our topic, everybody, is how to tell your life story in a job interview. And this isn't the elevator pitch or the response to the tell me about yourself question, but rather it's the story you tell in an interview about yourself and your profession. And I'm curious, what strategies do you all use when you tackle this, and what principles do you follow?
I'll go first. So
Becky was avoiding eye contact.
I always go first. I'll let someone else go.
All right.
So for me, I really like to put my professional life story into a narrative that kind of culminates with why I'm sitting in the room talking to the person I'm with. I think that kind of answers a lot of questions the interviewer might have already about, like, why are you here? What's your story? What's your background? How does it fit into the conversation we're having today? The trick here is, like, you got to customize that narrative a little bit about for each job that you're going to, because, there are multiple different destinations you might be going to in your career. And so you've got to, create that path, that narrative story to each one of those destinations, depending on who you're talking to.
I do the same type of, I take the same approach in general of using it as a storytelling mechanism. But in job interviews, it does usually come in the form of kind of a tell me about yourself, even if it's not directly those words, but something kind of open-ended of why are you here, or who are you type of a question. And I usually start out with something personal. I say, I'm a Portland native, kind of start that out and get people to understand who I am, because I'm still in Portland. And I think that kind of gives a large bit of information about me. And it also starts it out really personal. But then I do go into the not my whole life story of, I lived on a street in the suburbs. I never say any of that stuff, but I do kind of frame up what my career experience and my career history have looked like, and what I'm a big fan of finding the common threads in your career history and tying that all together to say, went to University of Oregon. I studied this, and now through taking on multiple positions in multiple industries, discovered that I'm really passionate about XYZ, and that's why I've discovered that this job would be really great, that sort of thing.
I love the structure of that,
Yeah.
Jessica. I mean, because it's really got three parts. This is who I am, this is what I've done, and this is why I'm here talking
Right.
to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like what you're saying, Jessica, about just sort of like the common threads and ties. I tend to start with that sort of big picture stuff. Like often I'll do some just thinking before an interview just about like refreshing like sort of what my strengths are, what I enjoy doing, what I think that my sort of core professional persona is, and sort of how to describe that like simply. So often I'll say something like, I've always been a very curious person, and that led me to journalism, to ask people questions, and that led me into marketing. And now I understand my audience because I've always asked questions and I've always been curious. And so I focus on results, and I focus on, who I'm speaking to, and customizing storytelling and all that stuff. And that sort of leads me down further into more of a detailed story about my job experiences and sort of projects and results and all that stuff. But I think it's good to sort of form that foundation so that the interviewer can understand this is like the core of this person. This is this is how I can sum them up to my manager, when they ask. So think about it that way.
Yeah, because as you talk, I mean, I can see you laying the foundation for a headline. So when the manager talks about you as a candidate to a peer or a superior, there's going to be a one sentence takeaway about you.
Make it easy for them.
Yeah. And I too follow the structure that Jessica outlined, and I think you touched on this, Jessica, but I always pay attention in the what section about what I have to offer, and I think back to Ben's point too about the employer's needs and why, and then like you, I close with a why I'm here, and I try to again connect that with the employer's problems.
Right, because in a job interview, it's really not a question of who are you. They care, but they don't really care to have a conversation. They just want to know why you would be a good fit.
And one of the reasons I like this kind of narrative structure that we're all hitting on here is because I've mentioned this before. Like the first question I have for any candidate is like, why are you here? Like, why this job? Why are you interested in working for me? And if you can create a narrative around this that not just like explains who you are and what you do well and what your skills are, but like the trajectory of your career, and you can position this job, the one you're talking about or for right now, as the culmination of everything else in your career, that's a really powerful message to convey off to an employer.
That's really well said, and that's what I was trying to say as well. Good job. Good job.
Great. Well, stories always stick with us, whether they're about the stories we tell in job interviews or in other work that we do. And I know Rob, who does a lot of work on storytelling, is going to touch on that too. So before we talk to Rob, let's turn to you, Ben, because every week you're out there poking around the internet looking for websites, books, and tools our listeners can use in a job search and a career. So what have you found for us this week, Ben?
So this week I want to talk about one of our favorite topics here on the podcast. Can you guess what it is, Mac?
LinkedIn?
You got it. LinkedIn. So I was...
Full disclosure, I've got a script.
Well,
I guessed that anyway.
And anyone who's listened to the show over the course of the last year or so probably knows that we like LinkedIn a lot. It's a powerful networking tool.
It's right up there with the longstanding debate about 1 or 2 pages for a resume.
Oh, don't get us into that, Mac.
All right. Let's go back to LinkedIn.
I'm slowly putting my fists away. So I was cruising around Twitter this week, and I came across what I thought was a really useful link about LinkedIn. And it's from fastcompany.com. It's an article called "Recruiters Explain What the Worst LinkedIn Profiles Have in Common." And the reason I like this is because it takes a lot of the key points from several of the episodes we've done on LinkedIn and kind of condenses it down to 5 major points. So I'm going to quickly go through those, and we can chat about them. So the first big mistake is your LinkedIn profile is outdated. And I know we've talked about this a lot. Your LinkedIn profile is a living document, and you got to go in there and update it regularly. Too many folks do it when they're looking for a job and then ignore it, and it falls by the wayside.
And it really does stand out if you haven't updated your LinkedIn profile in some time.
The next one, and I'm quoting verbatim here, your headline sucks. Which basically, you want to be creative in your headline and think about keywords, because LinkedIn is, at its essence, a search engine, and it indexes headlines. So you want to make sure you're using the right keywords in that headline, but also showing some creativity, something that's going to get people's attention.
And I see a lot of people use job functions here, things like coach or author or speaker.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah, others use job titles. But they do have some kind of headline.
Yeah, you have to have some headline. I think the argument here is that if you're looking for a job, having a really keyword intensive but also creative headline is a great way to get recruiters' attention, because they're looking at LinkedIn all day, and at a certain point, profiles just start looking all the same, right? So if you have some way to really capture people's attention, you're going to be remembered.
So you need to be strategic and be thoughtful about the keywords you choose and be creative.
You got it. Number 3 actually kind of speaks to something we were talking about earlier here, which is telling a coherent story. A lot of folks on LinkedIn just list all of their past work experience as if they're in a vacuum. Between these dates, I did this, and then after that, I did something different, without kind of tying it all together about what it means, creating a narrative or story around your career.
Yeah, and I see this a lot with the LinkedIn profiles that are just basically online resumes. There's a job title, a company, and sometimes people even leave out responsibilities, and they just go with the employer and the date, and it's such a lost opportunity.
Yeah, you have so much real estate there to play with. I mean, your LinkedIn profile has an infinite length as far as I know. And so use that opportunity. And again, this is another place where you can throw in keywords, because LinkedIn will index those. The 4th mistake people make, and this is coming from recruiters, they say the mistake is making it all about business, not putting any kind of personality into your LinkedIn profile.
And this is more than hobbies. It's actually listing perhaps volunteer activities like memberships on boards, involvement in sports leagues, or maybe even the PTA. But it all helps paint a picture, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it could be even hobbies, right? Because you never know what kind of connection you're going to find with someone else. I'll admit I make 2 or 3 references to the Cleveland Indians in my LinkedIn profile because I'm a big fan of the Cleveland Indians. And believe it or not, 2 or 3 people have reached out to me, not recruiters, but other contacts based on that. They're also fans of the Indians, and it gives us something to talk about and kickstart that relationship from. And finally, the biggest mistake you can make is you haven't published anything on LinkedIn. And basically, this doesn't mean you have to write a big blog post, but that you're not sharing articles or liking or commenting on other people's posts. It ends up, your profile looks like it's just kind of was created and forgotten about if you're not actively using it to connect with others and generate content.
And I think a lot of LinkedIn users miss out on this because they forget that LinkedIn is a social network. It's like Facebook or Instagram, and it's a dynamic platform, and you benefit the more you publish and the more you respond to comments and contribute to other comments to other people's profiles as well.
Mac, it's almost like you've done multiple podcasts on this topic. It's amazing. So if you would like to get the rundown of these 5 mistakes you're making with your LinkedIn profile, check out our resource of the week. Again, it's Recruiters Explain the Worst LinkedIn Profiles Have in Common. It's from Fast Company, and we'll have the URL in the show notes.
Well, thank you, Ben. And if you've got a suggestion for Ben, please write him. His address is ben@maxlist.org. We'd love to share your idea on the show. Now let's turn to you, our listeners. And Becky Thomas joins us to answer one of your questions. Becky, what's in the mailbag this week?
This week's listener question came in via email from Heather Rockwell in Newberg, Oregon. So Heather says, I'm young, passionate, fresh out of college, energetic, and ambitious. How do I get employers to take me seriously? I've had several interviews since graduation, and all of them left me feeling like I was too young, too optimistic, and too inexperienced for them. How can I show my potential as a young, early career professional? I know I have what it takes to perform the jobs I'm applying to, but I need them to see it. Heather, this is a good question, and I think most recent college grads probably feel this way at some point. I reread your question a couple of times, and a couple of things stood out to me that I wanted to dive into a little bit more. So Heather says, how do I get employers to take me seriously? And she feels like they see her as too optimistic. And both those things make me think that she's getting the impression that the employers see her as too young. And I'm wondering why that is. I think she would probably benefit from doing like a bit of a self-assessment as she's starting to go to more job interviews and things like that. What is it that is making them think that you're too young or too optimistic? Are you, too chatty? Are you talking like a young person, like slang or saying like all the time, which is something I do all the time? Do some assessment on sort of, are there some verbal tics? Are you maybe dressing a little young? And maybe just like go a little bit further towards dressing, speaking more formally, and just projecting a more professional. And I'm not saying that she's being unprofessional, but it's possible that just because she is a young person, sometimes older people are sort of intimidated by younger folks. And so just to sort of, look to the person that you're interviewing with and being, if they're older and they're more formal, just try to be a chameleon, try to like reflect what they're doing and just make them more comfortable. That's one thing that I was thinking about for her. Another thing, in general, as a young, fresh out of college person, I think it's important to not just say, I've got potential, I'm smart, because employers want to see results. They don't want to bet on your potential. So even, do some digging into your college experience, maybe even your high school work experience if you had part-time jobs and things like that. How can you show the skills that you have for the job that you're interviewing for with your resume or in the interview? Just getting creative with those skills and explaining some of the things that you've been able to accomplish so far. Because, it sounds like you're a smart person and you're very capable. And so use some of that concrete things that you've done and experienced already to show the employer what you can do. And I think that'll hopefully get you far. So that's sort of what I was thinking for Heather. Do you guys have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I think that what you just said in the second half is spot on, definitely, of pulling out what she has done and being able to highlight those accomplishments. And then I think partially the things that you said initially.
And I don't want to assume anything. It's just, I was rereading the question and.
Totally understandable. I'm not jabbing anything at you directly. I just want to add to that of projecting the confidence, because I think coming right out of college, you're very eager, and I think that's probably what they're picking up on with the optimistic and all of that is, you're young and you're really excited about getting a job, and that sometimes comes across as being naive or whatever. And I've definitely been there. I've had this multiple times. I've definitely had this sentiment of, I'm smart, I'm capable, but nobody will take me seriously because I also lead with my optimism and my energy, which is, I think, a great asset. So don't lose that, but also kind of what Becky was saying of making sure that what you're presenting is coming across very confident. And I think that when you have a list of your accomplishments and kind of have that as a base, you can use that to walk in a room with a lot of confidence and a lot more ease. And you mentioned that a little bit too, of kind of the calm demeanor and all of that stuff, which I think will really help that people can just pick up. And I'm not trying to say, Heather, that you are desperate, but I know that I've been there of like just desperately wanting a job, and every interview or every interaction is just you are a little bit too eager for the job, and that comes across as well of, if you kind of are a little bit more project self-assurance and confidence and all of those things, I think that would really help, but then also have all of the things to back it up with the accomplishments that you have.
Yeah.
I just go back to that kind of unpacking process that you were doing, Becky. So I'm guessing the problem is not your age, because I'm guessing the employer could figure out how old you are before they invited you in for the interview based on the length of your resume or your graduation dates. So I wouldn't say like right off the bat that like it's your age that's the problem. I'm guessing like you have to dig down a little bit deeper into that. And I guess I also would question like any employer who doesn't like enthusiasm. So enthusiasm in and of itself is probably not the problem. I'm guessing that enthusiasm isn't directed towards the employer's needs, maybe, right? That like if you're enthusiastic and stuff, but it's not directed to an immediate need the employer has, it's seen as kind of misguided enthusiasm or youthful enthusiasm or not relevant. And, again, I'm not sitting in the interviews. I don't know what's going on, but I would have to believe that if you were a very enthusiastic candidate who was really enthusiastic about solving the problems that organization had or that were required of that job, that would never be a barrier to most employers. And in the same vein, being young, if you're getting the interview, is clearly not a barrier either.
That's true. Yeah, she's already making it into the interview. So yeah, it's about directing that enthusiasm towards the employer's specific problems and not just saying, I've got all this potential, I'm smart, but I'm smart and here's how I'm going to help you.
Yeah, and demonstrating that you have some awareness of like real world problems, and because that could be something too of, if you think that everything's rosy all the time, it's wonderful to believe that, but also demonstrate some practicality.
Yeah, I like it.
What?
FYI, Jessica is rosy all the time.
But I'm also very practical, and hopefully you all know that.
For sure.
It's a wonderful combination.
Thank you, guys.
These are all terrific points. The only thing I would add is consider asking for feedback. And just because you ask doesn't mean you'll get it, but I can vividly remember early in my career asking for feedback, and the times that I did get it, and it didn't happen all the time. It was very helpful. So you might consider doing that as well, Heather, when you get a call or an email saying you haven't made it to the next round, and just see if you can set up a call and have a short conversation about what you might do better next time.
Yeah, that's a lot better than trying to guess what they were thinking. Yeah. But yeah, she's on the right track. So good luck, Heather.
Well, thank you, Becky, and thank you, Heather. If you've got a question for Becky, please send her an email. Her address is becky@maxlist.org. That's BECKY. You can also call our listener line. The number is area code 716-JOB-TALK. Or tweet us. Our Twitter handle is @MaxList. That's MACS_LIST. And if we use your question on the show, we'll send you a copy of our book, Land Your Dream Job Anywhere. We'll be back in a moment, and when we return, I'll talk with this week's guest expert, Rob Biesenbach, about how to tell your life story in a job interview. Most people struggle with job hunting. The reason is simple. Most of us learn the nuts and bolts of looking for work by trial and error. That's why I produce this podcast, to help you master the skills you need to find a great job. It's also why I wrote my new book, Land Your Dream Job Anywhere. For 15 years at MaxList, I've helped people in Portland, Oregon find meaningful, well-paying, and rewarding jobs that they love. Now I put all of my job hunting secrets in one book that can help you no matter where you live. You'll learn how to get clear about your career goals, find hidden jobs that never get posted, and ace your next job interview. For more information and to download the first chapter for free, visit maxlist.org/anywhere. Now let's turn to this week's guest expert, Rob Biesenbach. Rob Biesenbach helps organizations and individuals capitalize on the power of storytelling. He's an award-winning consultant to Fortune 500 companies, an engaging and informative keynote speaker, and a Second City-trained actor. Rob is also the author of 2 fun, practical books that use principles from the world of performance to help people communicate more successfully. And he's now at work on a 3rd book on storytelling. He joins us today from Evanston, Illinois. Rob, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Mac. Glad to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, Rob. Now, our topic this week, as you know, is how to tell our life story in a job interview when we're a candidate. Now, Rob, why do people struggle with this? Why is this hard to do?
I think it's very hard to talk about ourselves. I mean, some people, for ego reasons, they're shy about talking about themselves. But for most of us, it's very hard to edit ourselves. It's a very personal subject when you're telling your story of your life or of your career. So how do you separate what's important from what's not important? How do you avoid going down long tangents? How do you avoid oversharing? Those are some of the challenges people face in telling their story.
Now, you mentioned some challenges, and I want to talk about how to overcome them. Are there other common mistakes you see people make, Rob, when they're telling their stories to employers and in a job interview?
I think the biggest mistake is something I call alphabet soup syndrome, where it's just a recitation of a bunch of job titles, job history, dates, functions. It's more listicle than narrative. It's like reading your LinkedIn profile instead of telling a story. So it's just not that compelling.
But facts are important, and you want to make sure when you're a candidate that the people you're talking to are aware of all of your experience. Why shouldn't you just restate what's on your resume, or at least try to hit the highlights or the headlines?
Well, absolutely, facts are important, but they do have the resume presumably in front of them. They've looked at it. So you don't need to obviously recap everything that you've done, but a story is a great way to highlight some of the most important things you've done, and also just provide a narrative flow that's easier for the hiring manager to understand and consume and remember.
Now, I know stories are a lot more persuasive than facts. Why is that so, Rob? Why are we more engaged as listeners and as employers when we're hearing from a job candidate about their story rather than just getting a recitation of basic facts on a resume?
Yeah, study after study after study has confirmed that storytelling is the most powerful form of communication there is. It's neuroscience. When you tell a story, it activates people in a much different way than when you're just reciting a bunch of information. It affects us on a physical level. When we hear a good story, our eyes dilate, our hands sweat. On an emotional level, we empathize. On an intellectual level, we put ourselves inside that story and ask what we would do. So it's all very experiential. Stories sweep us away and captivate us. And it really is the best way to break down walls with people and build trust and create a relationship.
So let's talk about a good story. What does it look like? Does it have common elements?
Yes, there are important elements that are almost universal to storytelling. There has to obviously be a character. And in this particular situation, the character is you, the job hunter, generally. There has to be some kind of challenge you've overcome, some kind of conflict, and there has to be a resolution of how you resolved that particular challenge. So there are lots of different ways to tell your story. There are a lot of different kinds of stories you can tell, but those are the main elements.
So I can imagine listeners thinking, gosh, that sounds like a Hollywood screenplay, and I don't want to write a screenplay, Rob. I just want to get a job. Can you tell our listeners how to, and I love the structure that you outlined, and I think it's spot on. Can you tell our listeners how they can translate that into an interview and how to apply that to their own lives? Yes, you do not have to worry about creating a Hollywood movie. And this is when I do storytelling workshops, I always assure people, the story you tell does not have to send the person out of their chair laughing or have them break down in tears. It doesn't have to be that kind of story. It can be just enough to provide a glimpse of who you are, what you value, and the value you bring. So don't set such a high hurdle for yourself. There are some very simple steps that anyone can take to tell a good story, including a story about themselves. And I can start with the first step if you want to hear that. That'd be terrific.
The first step is really to try to figure out what has been the theme of your career or life. Steve Jobs gave this great commencement address to Stanford University a number of years ago. Your listeners can find it on YouTube. But as he was addressing the anxious, soon-to-be graduates about their futures, he talked about connecting the dots in the things they do. He said, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. So the point is, whether you know it or not, and some people may feel, oh, I've gone from job to job without any clear focus or direction. There has been something driving you forward, and maybe you don't recognize it. So number one is to try to find what they call the implicit narrative of your career, or the theme that sort of draws all these experiences together.
Did you have some tips about how people who might be struggling with identifying that narrative, that theme, how they might do that?
Yes. Look back at your work history. What are some of your biggest accomplishments? What are some of the challenges you faced? What are the traits and skills you brought to bear? And are there some commonalities? Look at awards. Look at recognition. Look at performance reviews. Look at the reason people bring you into a team in the workplace. Why do they bring you in? Oh, you're the negotiator, or you're the cool head at a time of crisis, or you're the organizer. Whatever it is, there is something there. So finding that narrative thread I think is the first key.
One way I've seen people do that as well is to turn to friends or peers or colleagues and ask them to identify the 2 or 3 things that a person is really good at. And sometimes you get surprising insights by doing that.
Absolutely. Yours is the extrovert version. Talk to actual people. Mine, I guess, was to go off by yourself and look at a bunch of paper.
Well, I think
yes, I agree.
And I think we have both introverts and extroverts listening to the show. Mm-hmm. So that's step one, is identifying that narrative and finding that theme. And after we've done that, Rob, what do we need to do next?
Well, I have a number of steps. It's really just 5 steps that will take you through your story. I think I can best illustrate it by telling my story. It's one I tell in my workshops, and people find it useful in bringing the structure to life.
God, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, and I'll start with how I found my narrative thread. Well, maybe I should start with a story. No, I'll start with a narrative thread. The thing that has tied my experiences together, believe it or not, has been a desire to perform. I was the youngest of 4 children, so I was, the self-proclaimed often center of attention. I was in school. I attempted to be the class clown. When I was in the workplace, I was often recruited to do comic sketches or song parodies when people were retiring or leaving or having a birthday or something. And even in the assignments that I gravitated to, I started speech writing about 20 years ago, and I was apparently really good at it. And writing a speech and delivering a speech is very much about performance. It's about drama and story and rhythm and tempo. And then, of course, I got into performance. I got into acting. I started doing improv and sketch and all the rest. So that has been the driving narrative of my life, that I didn't know it, but it was always there in my subconscious.
So that's step one of your process, but tell us about the next step, and by sharing your own story.
Sure. And I suggest people make their story short, a minute and a half, maybe. You can time mine. Sometimes I go a little over, but the essentials of the story is this: that for most of my adult life, I pursued a conventional career in business, doing corporate communications and PR. And it was rewarding, but I always felt there was something more calling to me, something more creative. And about a dozen years ago, I stepped into the offices of Second City in Chicago and began taking improv classes. And then I did sketch. I moved into theater, comedy, drama, commercial work. I'd soon built an entire second career. So I was kind of living these 2 lives. During the day, I was serving my corporate clients, and at night I was rehearsing and performing, and I thought these 2 worlds were not able to be reconciled. But a funny thing happened. The more I performed on stage and studied acting, the more I realized that these two worlds I was inhabiting were not that different, business and acting. They both require you to connect with an audience, to express yourself creatively, to tell stories. And so I found a way to bring the worlds together. So I'm in my workshops and my books. So I'm sharing the business knowledge I've accumulated, and I'm performing in a way on stage in front of audiences. And in the process, I'm helping people become more skilled, confident communicators. And it's really, really rewarding.
That sounds like that's a great summary of how you've combined those two interests, both working in improv and in business. So, and that's the narrative. What is the second step in your process, Rob? How do people take that narrative and advance that story, particularly in a job interview?
Well, I break down the narrative actually into 5 steps. If they want to formulate the narrative, and going back, if you found that common thread, and the thread for me was performance, is really a 5-step process. You begin in the beginning, like any good story, and that's sort of the normal state. So if you look at my story, the normal state was me pursuing a conventional career in business. The second thing is something comes along to disrupt the normal, an inciting incident. For me, the inciting incident was this desire to perform. And then you have the third step, which is the turning point. The turning point was when I decided to sign up for classes at Second City. And the next one is conflict. Okay, where is the conflict in this story? Because that's where every story lives and breathes. The conflict for me was I had these 2 separate areas of my life that I was unable to reconcile. And I resolved it, the 5th step, resolution, I resolved it by bringing them together in my workshops and books and offering people some value. So those are the 5 steps.
I love that structure. And what I particularly like is you tell your story is it addresses the concern that might be on an employer's mind if you were a candidate for a job. And I can imagine a hiring manager thinking, oh, gosh, this Rob, he's certainly talented in business communications. He knows public relations, but what he really wants to do is comedy. And he may just want to park here for a while until he gets another gig. And the way you tell your story, it addresses exactly who you are and why you do what you do and the benefit that you might offer a hiring manager if you were interviewing for a job with a company.
Well, it was a fascinating journey as I sort of developed this, trying to figure out where I was going. My old website was literally black and white and 2 sides. On one side was art and on the other side was business. And I set them up as 2 separate things. I didn't tell my clients I was performing. I didn't like telling my acting friends what I did during the day. It felt really weird. But I realized I was becoming more creative and providing more value to my clients. So it was time to sort of bring this other side of me out of the closet to the clients and show them that, yeah, I do this other thing, but there's no reason to think it's weird or off track. It is directly benefiting you because I'm bringing you more creativity, more value.
And I think your story and the way you tell it reflects what's happening to many of us in the workplace. We all wear multiple hats. We have different interests. And we need to find ways to communicate the value of those interests and those skills and to our employer, because it can offer so many benefits to a hiring manager. I certainly have struggled with this myself personally because, as you know, I run a public relations company that does social change communications for foundations and nonprofits, and I also am the publisher of Max List, and people, I think, get perplexed by that sometimes. Here's the fellow who's running an online community that helps people find work, but is also a social change communicator. What is the common connection between the two? And for me, it is connection. I enjoy connecting people to make great things happen, whether it's telling the stories of our clients on the public relations side of my work or helping to connect creative people with rewarding, meaningful work. And that's the common denominator that links the two.
Oh, that's great. You found your narrative thread, your implicit narrative. That's so cool. And I think there's so much emphasis, so much pressure these days to specialize, to have selected expertise and go after a niche. And I've had such a diverse career in government, nonprofit, corporate, agency, solo practice, acting, writing, all the other stuff. Every one of those has helped me in every other area of my life. So I think for other people who have this diverse experience, don't denigrate yourself. Embrace that. Find the connection, find that implicit narrative, and make that a strength, a positive.
And I know, Rob, you have had a fascinating career, but it's an experience that so many people are having in the workplace. Many of us can expect to change jobs 7, 8, maybe even 10 times in a 40-year career, and we'll probably change careers 2 or 3 times. So it's great to have an approach like this that you've laid out that helps explain why we do what we do and what we offer to others who may want to work with us. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. I think once you've established this, you know what you're about and where you're going, then you can start making more informed choices about the next step in your career.
Well, terrific. Well, Rob, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Now, tell us what's coming up next for you.
Next for me is another baby in about 3 weeks. We're having our second baby.
That's wonderful.
It's very terrific. Exciting.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. That's on the personal side. On the professional side, I'm working on my 3rd book. So second baby, 3rd book. The 3rd book is on storytelling, and it includes chapters on how to use stories in job interviews and networking, as well as many other areas.
Terrific. Well, I know people can learn more about you by visiting your website, and that is robbiesenbach.com. I'm going to spell that out for the benefit of listeners. It's R-O-B, and then Biesenbach is BIESENBACH.com. We'll be sure to include that in the show notes, and I think we'll also have some news about your upcoming book as well in the show notes.
Yeah, and if people want, they can get a couple of free chapters of the book, including the one about how to shape your personal narrative for job interviews. If they go to my website, you gave them the URL, robbiesenbach.com, but if they go to robbiesenbach.com/story, that will get them to where they can access this and download this free chapter.
Okay. And we'll include that link in the show notes as well. Rob, thanks for joining us today.
All right. Thank you, Mac. I appreciate it.
Well, I enjoyed that conversation with Rob. I'm curious to get your thoughts. Becky, what are you thinking about my interview with Rob?
I thought it was great. I thought his personal story is really interesting. The fact that he sort of started to weave in his personal experience as an actor and things like that into his professional experience. I always sort of struggle with that, especially for job interviews. It's like, how much personal stuff do you bring into it? Because you are a person and your career is a part of your life as a person, but you're not supposed to bring a lot of personal stuff into it. So I think it was really helpful for him to sort of share how, when your personal passions influence the things that you bring to your career and, whether you have clients or whatever it is, the potential employer, it's okay to bring that stuff in. And it adds power to your sort of career story.
Yeah.
So that was cool.
It does just add to it. It makes it more robust
and
more relatable, which is nice.
And the employer remembers you for that, and
and it just brings more authenticity and humanism or something. Whatever that word is. But I mean, obviously telling a story and being able to be succinct but also powerful in that is a really huge asset, and it's a great skill for anybody to have. And I think for interviews especially is great, but just to be able to tell a succinct story about who you are and what you're looking for, just when you meet people at networking events and things like that, that's, again, not your elevator pitch, but something that you can, where I also liked what he said about avoiding the alphabet soup syndrome, which I've never heard it called that, but kind of going off track and having something not even pre-prepared, but knowing what your bullet point words and sentences are going to be.
Yeah.
So almost that you
just the facts approach.
Right, exactly. So that you can so that you can easily, customize it for whatever industry, whatever space you're in. I'm struggling with my words now, but also having something at the ready for when people ask you, because people want to know those things. And especially, again, in job interviews, it's really important.
I agree. I like a lot of the talk he had about finding threads in your career. And he had some great expression, and I wrote it down, and I can't find the paper now, but it was like, the threads are your experience, your history, and your values. And I think, speaking to your point, Becky, like to really talk about that in a sincere way, you have to talk about who you are kind of outside of your work life, because that informs your values, or that bespeaks your values, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you can really kind of distill your message down to those key fundamental threads, I think you've presented like a really powerful argument to the employer that like, I live this. It's not just like that I'm really good at this. It's also that it's important to me as a person, and I'm going to bring that passion to you as an employer.
I like the structure that he outlined for how to tell your story. And then also, he and I touched on this in our conversation, but I thought it was such an important point. By telling your story in this way, you help explain to the employer why you're there and why you want to be there and what you have to offer. And sometimes, particularly if we've had different kinds of jobs or worked in different fields, employers can struggle with understanding, well, why does that person want to be here? Maybe what they really want to do is this other thing that they used to do. Mm-hmm. And this helps address that concern and it makes you an even better candidate.
Yeah, totally. It makes you more interesting.
Yeah. Well, terrific. Well, thank you all. And thank you, Rob, for joining us this week. And thank you, our listeners, for downloading today's episode of Find Your Dream Job. If you like what you hear, please sign up for our free weekly newsletter. In every issue, we give you the key points of that week's show. We also include links to all the resources mentioned, and you get a full transcript of the episode. If you subscribe to the newsletter now, we'll send you our new guide, The Top Career Podcasts of 2017. Discover all the podcasts that can help you find a great job and get the career you want. Get your free newsletter and career podcast guide today. Go to maxlist.org/podcast. And join us next Wednesday when we'll have a special treat for you. We're celebrating our 100th episode with a live show recorded in front of a studio audience at the Fremont Theater in Portland, Oregon. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job.